episode. It's a live episode, and today I want to talk you through the 5 core steps in the process that you need to follow for getting your dog over separation anxiety. I've covered it before, but it's always one of those that's worth covering again. So I'm going to talk you through each of the 5 steps, tell you what each of those steps involves, and then if we have time at the end, we'll do some questions. We will have time. So that's what I've got in store for you today. If you're watching, dump in the comments, tell me where in the world you are and whether you're watching with your dog. I do always like to know if your dog is watching right beside you. Now, I'm not with dog at the moment. I'm all on my own. So it'd be nice to know that we've got some doggies actually watching us today. Okay, so just to step back a second. If you don't already know, let me just remind you that the way that we get our dogs over separation anxiety is by making them feel better about being alone. So it's not that we try to stop the barking if your dog's a barker. It's not that if you've got a dog who chews, you stop the chewing. What we do is we stop their desire to do that. And can you see the difference between trying to stop the barking by physically or in some way changing, doing something that stops the bark, rather than stopping your dog's desire to bark, which more often than not is driven by emotion. Not more often than not. When your dog's home alone and panicking, that bark comes from emotion. Hello, hi to everyone. Christine's outside playing ball. I love it. Anya is in the UK. We've got a few UK folk. Hope you're having a lovely long weekend there. Hope the weather's kind for bank holiday. Yeah, if you have a question for me, then just pop in the comments. And what I'll do is when I've gone through the 5 steps, then we'll take comments after that. Does that sound okay? If I find that I've got a ton of comments on each step, then what I'll do is I'll break after each step. If you're anything like me, what you'll do is you'll forget your step and you'll forget your question. That's what I would do. Another question for you, though. How many nicknames does your dog have? I know that sounds totally random, but I'm loving reading in the comments about your dogs napping or at your feet. And I was just thinking this morning, I just said to my husband, like one of our dogs in particular seems to have like 500 nicknames. Do you have a dog that has like a gazillion nicknames? Tell me how many nicknames your dog's got in the comments, just because I like to know about your dogs. Okay, let us, without any ado, proceed. Step 1. It might sound really obvious, but you can't do this training until you know where you're starting from, right? It's like following a Google map. It's like plugging in a destination in GPS and saying, Google, how long is it going to take me? Or how do I get to this place? And Google will say, well, I don't know. Where are you now? So you need to know where your dog is currently. You've got to work out where your dog is right now. And there are 2 main questions that you need to answer, or there are 2 choices at this stage. You need to know, can you start the training, which is step 2, can you start the training by going out of the door? So is your dog okay enough that you can at least get out of the door for a couple of seconds? Or, and this is really, really common, by the way, does your dog just freak out even before you get to the door? Does your dog completely lose it before you even get to the door? So this is the main question that we're trying to answer in step 1, because that's going to tell us what's going to happen in step 1 or step 2. I've got another question for all of you listening or watching. When you first started separation anxiety training, where did you start? Did you start with just getting your dog being okay with you getting out of the door? Or were you able to start with what we call departure training? Tell me in the comments. So when you've decided that, then you're going to be able to pick a training approach, which is either going to be what we call departure training or door as a ball. But now, hang on a second, you'll be saying to me, but how do I know which of those choices to make? Well, if you haven't done this before, make sure you get a camera to watch your dog when you go out. Set the camera up. It doesn't have to be expensive. Somebody asked me the other day for a recommendation for a camera. I have kind of stopped doing that now because there are so many that seem to have a great review. So, go on to wherever you buy your electronics and get yourself one of these, cheap, they call them nanny cams or surveillance cams, security cams. Get one of those, and you're going to set it up so that you can watch your dog. The choice is endless now. 10 years ago, 12 years ago, when we were trying to get my dog over separation anxiety, this guy, I always do that wrong. It was impossible to find a camera that does what you can do now. So you set your camera up on your dog, you get the app, and usually what happens when you set the camera up on your dog, you can get a companion app so you can see your dog on your phone, and you are going to try to step out of the door. Now, if your dog just loses it before you even get to the door, I want you to do something else. In fact, you're probably best off doing this before you even try to go to the door. Don't put on shoes or coat or pick up a bag. Don't do any of those things. Don't pick up your keys unless you're going to get locked out if you step out of the door. So don't do any of those things. All right. If you need your shoes on, and I get it, put your shoes on. But you're going to drop what we call those departure cues, because for lots of dogs, that makes them so panicky before you even think about going out. It's not that you are going to go out in your bare feet forever. It's not that you'll never be able to lock your door. It's just that the focus right now is getting your dog comfortable with you going out of the door and staying out for increasing lengths of time. And we'll come back to cues at another point. All right, so we've got our camera set up. We can see our dog on the phone. We aren't doing all the stuff with the keys. It's old advice. Forget about it. Now you're going to go to the door. If your dog loses it, before you get to the door, stop. Just stop. You've got the answer you need. You've got your data. If you can get out of the door and close the door, you need to have an idea of how long you can do that for. Honestly, right now you can just count. Whatever it is you use for seconds. I do elephant. I don't know why I do elephant. 1 elephant, 2 elephant. I know, sounds crazy. Just count. It's as simple as that, because you're probably not going to get to 5 minutes. I'd be shocked if you got to a minute. So if you're trying this and you want to cry because, she said do this thing where I've got to work out whether I can get out of the door, or, I get out of the door, but I've only got 30 seconds. I just want to give up before I even start. I just want you to know that every dog who's now over separation anxiety, nearly every single dog who's now over separation anxiety started at seconds or started with their owner not even be able to go out of the door. So if that's where you are now, you are in good company. Okay, so that is the decision, and that's how you're going to make it. And at the end of that process, you are either going to do door as a ball, which I'm going to come on to in a second, or departure training. Okay, I'm going to take a little break, and I am going to just check some questions. Can't go near one of the doors, says Shani, unless I'm carrying a full poop bag or have one of your podcasts playing. That's quite hilarious. Oh, I'm all out of focus there. There we go. The thing is, though, Shani, what's really interesting there is, let's talk about the full poop bag. I have no idea why your dog has decided this, but your dog has decided that that's what a safety cue, that says to your dog, oh, this one's going to be fine, whatever reason. Equally, with lots of dogs, keys say, this one's going to be scary. And dogs didn't come into the world thinking that keys were scary or poop bags were safe. That's the first time I've come across that one. But they decide based on the communication, on the message that gives. So if keys predict that you're going out and you're going out for a long time and that's scary, they start getting scared of keys. So what we need to do is change that association, and we will do that later on in the process. Carol says it varies depending on if they've been for a walk, then I can get out and leave them for a short period. Otherwise, they follow me everywhere to see if I'm putting on clothes to take them. Yeah. And Carol, in Heroes, as you know, we talk about different scenarios. So you might have to set up a scenario for when they've been out for a walk or when they haven't. Lots of dogs are very variable here. Yeah, Lee and Jeff are both giving great advice about cameras. And that is that, especially when you're starting out, you don't necessarily need to splash the cash, because I know money is tight right now. There are apps that allow you to use even an old phone, the phone that maybe, has been sitting in the back of your cupboard for a few years. You keep meaning to recycle it, but you don't. You can even, as long as a phone will power up and connect to Wi-Fi, there are apps like Alfred that will allow you to use those phones. I'm all about trying to keep your costs down. Okay, right. So let's go on to step 2. You're going to do your first gradual exposure exercise. What on earth is she talking about? The technique that we use to get dogs to be okay with things that they're scared of is called gradual exposure. And it isn't stopping them experiencing the thing that scares them. It's actually the opposite. We expose them to whatever scares them, whether that's men with hats, if you're like my dog Tex, that one. If you're like my dog Tex, or it's skateboards, or it's fireworks, or it's alone time. We actually expose them, but we do it in a really safe way. So we take the thing that they're scared of, and for us it's alone time, right? For our dogs it's alone time, and we turn down the intensity on that alone time, which sounds odd. What do I mean by that? We just reduce the amount of time to a time that your dog isn't scared, right? It doesn't make your dog scared. So think about fireworks. It's sometimes easier to think about this concept in terms of noise. Imagine we had fireworks playing on a CD. A CD? I can't believe I said CD. I was thinking about that because we were clearing out CDs the other day. On Spotify. But what you do is, to get your dog to be okay with that noise, you don't start with the fireworks playing at volume 10. You start with volume 1, and your dog goes, oh, I can sort of hear that, but that's okay, that's not scary. And then as your dog gets more comfortable, you can maybe go to 1.5 or 2 or 2.5 and so on. And it's the same with alone time. We take that time, but we reduce it drastically to a time that your dog is okay with. And then we gradually expose. So we are exposing your dog to alone time, but in safe, tiny little increments. We never go too far, too fast. We go at your dog's pace. And yeah, okay, some great comments coming through. I will get to those. So if you can't get out of the door right now, then what you're going to do is going to do door is a bore. And door is a bore kind of does what it says on the tin. You're going to convince your dog that the door, it means nothing to them. It's meaningless. It doesn't predict good things. It doesn't predict bad things. Now, there's a full and detailed door is a bore plan that you can grab in any of my books. And there's a video in my free group that shows how to do that. So I won't take the time here going through all of those steps because there are a lot of them. But just think about the concept of gradually showing your dog that the door means absolutely nothing. So nothing in it for you when I open the door, dog. And then with the departure exercises, how do you work out what does the training plan look like? And that's a really important part of this method. You have to train with a plan. If you're in my Separation Anxiety Heroes, and I know some of you are, you know that we use a training app because the app works out what an exercise looks out and it works out the steps. If that's not you, again, it's in my books and it's in my success tracker. If you haven't got my books, here's a quick overview that you might be able to use and start training with tomorrow. So if you were able to get out the door successfully, mark down that time. It's more likely seconds. And then you're going to take that time and reduce it slightly. So say you got out for 10 seconds and your dog was fine. Take it down to about 80% of that. So that's easy. So that's at 8 seconds. And that's the time that you're going to focus on. You want to go out of the door repeatedly, but those first few times you go out of the door, don't go out for 8 seconds, go out for a shorter amount of time. And do about 10 repetitions of that. So go out of the door, maybe for 2 seconds, come back in. Pause, go out again, maybe for 5 seconds. Write it all down before you go as well, though. Like I said, grab one of my books or do it the traditional way. Just get a notepad and write down your exercise. Write down what you're going to do. And later on, I'm going to tell you that you need to write down what you did. So the two things are really important. So do it. See how your dog did. If your dog did well, then we're going to move on. And if your dog didn't do so well, you need to make it easier the next time. Don't repeat an exercise where your dog was kind of a bit, You either need to, move it on because your dog did really well, or make it easier. Don't repeat stuff if you don't think your dog did really well. Okay, any questions on step 1 and step 2? Let me go back up. Carol, that's great news about Alfie and Roxy yesterday. Interesting. Michael says, I can't go out at all unless working in the garden and leave from there. And Michael, I remember back in the day when my dog had separation anxiety, there were certain things that if we did them differently, he would do differently well. Different doors make a difference. Sometimes going in the car, not going in the car, all those things can affect different dogs in different ways, because what they're doing is they're connecting all the stuff around them to say, is this going to be okay for me or not okay? Is this going to be scary or not scary? And no doubt, Michael, what's happened with your dog is that for whatever reason, they've decided they can be okay on their own when you're in the garden, and they just work it out in their own little way. So you can use that to your advantage. If you can then get out from the garden, then make the most of that. It's lots of people say, but oh, that's cheating. No, it's not. It's just allowing your dog to feel safe and giving you a bit more freedom and opportunity to do the training. What does really well mean? Yeah, Liz, brilliant question. Really well is, it's easy for me to say because I do this over and over again. For me, what I'm looking at is, wow, that dog just didn't seem bothered at all by the departure. Now, dog didn't stay on its bed. I don't care about that. Your dog might follow to the door. I don't care about that because, by the way, that's really normal behavior. You're doing something really weird. But I'm not seeing telltale signs of anxiety. I'm not seeing excessive amounts of lip licking or yawning or stiffening or trotting to the door or really sniffing under the door. So because we're not changing the way a dog feels about being home alone to, yes, I love this, we're changing it to neutral. It's kind of weird in a way because you aced it, fantastic, did really well. It's actually neutral behavior, right? So it means not a lot going on. They can follow to the door, have a look at what you're doing, but as long as you don't think they're anxious. If you think they're anxious, make it easier next time. Yeah, Kristen, I know the struggle to find people to look after your dog is difficult. And watch this space because we are launching something in July. I know it's a way off that might help you. Did anybody hear that? I don't know what that was. Anyway, all right, let's get on because we've got got 3 more steps to cover. I talked about you writing down the exercise you're going to do. When you've done that, or as you're going through the exercise, take good notes. So say things like, Poppy trotted to the door quite quickly at step 3. Or at step 4, she had a really big sniff under the door. Describe what you see, describe her body language. Write down if there was any noises outside. Write down what she did in the morning, or if you're training in the morning, what did she have for breakfast? So take good notes on the exercise and on what you did that day, because at some point you might want to decide to look back and say, I'm not quite sure. We seem to get stuck on this particular, what's going on here, right? And you look back and you go, oh, wait a minute, she seems to struggle every Saturday afternoon, so I'm not going to train Saturday afternoons. Some other questions coming in, they're great ones, and I'm going to get to them in a second. So keep good notes because you will want to use them. Right, so, and this goes back to the question about, that Liz asked, what does really well do? You're going to move the time on, so you're going to increase the duration if your dog shows no anxiety. Interest is fine, curiosity is fine, following is fine, but anxiety, no. Now, lots of people will tell you this isn't working unless your dog is staying on its bed or, lying on the sofa. It's not true. In fact, if we look at the research around desensitization and gradual exposure and how it's used for humans, because this is the method that's used to treat human fears, the evidence actually says that what matters isn't the state of relaxation, it's the exposure to the thing, right? I talked about exposing your dog to the thing that scares it. That's the thing that changes your dog's brain, not the state of relaxation. And quite honestly, I'm stood up now and I feel quite buzzy because I love doing these lives with you. I'm definitely not anxious, but you wouldn't class me as classically, chilled out. I feel chilled, but I'm not sat on the sofa just kind of, do you know what I mean? So don't be fooled by your dog doing something during the training. That's fine, as long as they're not anxious. And how do you gradually progress your time? Tiny increments. So if you're on 10 seconds, it might be 12 next time. All right. And if you didn't do well at 10 seconds, drop back. Again, I know some of you got my books and you're thinking, okay, this is all in my book, so I'll cover it, but it's helpful, I hope, for you to hear me explain it, and we'll talk about your questions on it too. If you're on Door as a Ball, you just go up a step if your dog did well, and you go down a step if your dog didn't do well. All right. Let me just see if you've got any more questions on that. Yeah, that can be difficult. Amanda says, my trouble is my two dogs feed off each other when I go out, and when I come back in, they're actually screaming, howling, etc. So if one dog has separation anxiety, Amanda, I'd highly recommend, if you can, that you pop the other dog in a different room because they're not anxious. If they've both got separation anxiety, you can do the training, but you work at the pace of the dog that's got the most anxiety at being left. Anse says, I'm on the app with Jane. Is that Jane Robinson? And after 2 weeks, we're only up to 30 seconds. Can I do the exercise multiple times a day? I feel like I'm never going to get there. Well, firstly, can I say that all of you who are doing separation anxiety training currently will look at that and say, actually, 30 seconds in 2 weeks isn't bad progress. And at which point everyone else is like, well, whoa, I can never get my dog to be home alone if I can only do 30 seconds in 2 weeks. You've got to remember that we are changing a big and traumatic association in your dog's brain. And the initial journey in particular takes a lot of time. I say to all my clients in Separation Anxiety Heroes, don't do the maths on it. Don't work out that if I did 30 seconds in 2 weeks, get my spreadsheet out or get my calculator out, oh my goodness, he's going to be 11 by the time I get to 2 hours. It doesn't work like that. You will spend way more time on these initial sessions. So even if you get to the stage where you've finished working with Jane and you're only on 30, 40 seconds a minute, you've done tons of groundwork, that tiny changes that might not be obvious to you, but tiny changes that are happening in your dog's brain that make for big changes later on. But ask Jane about frequency, because yeah, sometimes yes, and sometimes we don't want for that particular dog to do too much. And also check out my latest episode 71, about what's going on in your dog's brain and why getting to 30 seconds is actually not bad progress at all. Okay, let's get to step 4. And Rena says, I can't believe I missed most of this. Don't worry, Rena, I'm still doing questions. And if you're listening or watching the recording, then it will always be there for you. Okay, so don't worry. The final one, and this is the point at which people usually throw things at the screen at me, and I get it, because I remember the first time that it twigged that the way we were going to get Percy over separation anxiety was do all the training, but then also not leave him. And there's a big part of you that just rages and says, are you insane? This wasn't a trainer telling me this. This was me poring over all the literature about how we get change a brain and change associations and get brains over fear. And the problem is, it's like trying to heal a wound. If you keep reopening that wound, it never heals, no matter how much you treat it, no matter how much you dress it. But that doesn't lessen the bombshell, the anger, the pain that you feel when you realize that. Because hang on a minute, if you could find a way not to leave your dog, if not leaving your dog and having somebody with your dog 24/7 wasn't a big problem, you wouldn't be on this session and you wouldn't be wondering how to get your dog over separation anxiety. So, but now I'm telling you that you can't leave your dog just now. So if you want to throw things at the screen, if you want to throw things at me, I am fine with that, because I remember that feeling too. But it is doable. I see people in all sorts of situations who do eventually work it out. It's incredibly tough. It's a drain on emotion and time and finances, but it is worth the pain. And the thing is, it's short-term pain for long-term recovery, for long-term happiness for you and your dog. So if you can, dig in and do this. Now, if you're thinking, there is no way I can stop leaving my dog, I get that. So why don't you try next week? Just have your dog be with somebody 1 more hour than they currently are, because you've just made the world a bit better for your dog. It's not ultimately where you need to be, but you're making a step towards that. I find that with this, some people are cold turkey and they'll say, okay, all right, we'll get this sorted. And other people, whether it's just logistics or finance or just because it's such a crazy notion, take more time to get there. But see if you can just make a little change next week and maybe another one after that, and so on. Okay, so let me go back and look at some questions. Rena says, my 2-year-old cockapoo is terrible alone. I try to train him, but any stress triggers his IBD. Yeah, and Rena, I don't know if you've got my book, but there's a case study in my book, and it's about a dog that was in a very, very similar situation to you. So not a cockapoo, beagle. And he also had IBD. He also was triggered by any stress that not just separation anxiety training, but out and about training. So with them, in a way, we've kind of got an even better barometer of how they're doing, because if the training is too much, then we are going to trigger their physical response. So you can do it, Rena. You absolutely can. It's Jen and Ashby, by the way. Sorry, Jen and Ashby. So read their case study, because he had all sorts of issues, reactivity, IBD, but she did an amazing job. You can absolutely do it. It's just about going at their pace and the pace that doesn't trigger them. Oh, Kristen, I'm really sorry. And I can equate a little bit, because when we discovered Percy first had separation anxiety, I was here on my own in Canada. I didn't know anybody. And people don't understand. So, I'd be in a work meeting. I was lucky. I managed to find somebody who would have him until 5 p.m. But I worked in the sort of, job where leaving at 5 p.m. isn't what you did. And I felt like saying, but if I was saying I'm going back to my kids because the sitter's leaving in half an hour, that might have been okay. But to say I've got to go because my dog, can't leave my dog, it was just so, yeah, it is really, really hard. You do what you can, and you are doing what you can, I can tell. So see how, can you, eventually what I did was I looked for, like, my neighbor used to have them. I put notes on Facebook, that kind of thing. It's not easy. I know it's not easy. And you are doing what you can. So thank you for doing that. Jenny's got a brilliant question here. Any suggestions for telling the difference between non-anxious barking that stopped after a minute and anxiety? You've kind of answered the question yourself in there. I don't like it when we test dogs out, when we say, let's see how long this barking goes. But sometimes we get that data because we've done it in the past. We've gone out, they've barked for a minute, and then they've settled. So non-anxious barking and barking that's driven by fear have quite different motivations. So dogs behave because of a motivation, right? Motivation drives what they do when they're left alone. Panic, as you know, motivates you to behave in a very, very purposeful, direct, and energetic way. If you're panicking about something, you keep going until you deal with the source of the panic. And that's often the difference with dogs who bark because, hang on a minute, I think you've forgotten me, and the ones in a panic. Panic makes behavior very persistent. If you think back to any time that you've been frightened, you get really determined. Your behavior gets very driven. Hi, Rhiannon. Honestly, everything does work. I can leave Cody for over an hour upstairs. I'm now starting to start him leaving downstairs. Yay, that's fantastic. Well done. Well done. I love hearing those little success stories. Thank you for sharing that. Michael says, is it okay to leave my dog in the car? He cries out whilst I'm getting out, but settles down straight away after and without any signs of stress. And I'm not going to tell anybody to leave their dog in the car because I don't know where they live. However, what I will say is that lots of dogs, for whatever reason, seem to do better in the car than they do at home. So dogs with separation anxiety, some of them are awful in the car. Some of them are as bad in the car as they are at home. But some of them do seem to do better in the car. So if it's winter and you're not in Alberta where it can be minus 30, if it's winter and there's no sun and it's a cloudy day and your dog's okay in the car and you're not worried about theft, you see, there's so many things I have to say, because I do worry about theft and I do worry about overheating, but I know that all of you are sensible enough to make those decisions. You wouldn't be on here asking questions otherwise. But it does seem to be the case that some dogs do better. If I had to put money on why that is, my guess is that from a very early stage, they've seen us go and come back, go and come back, go and come back. Yeah, and Cody's worse in the car. Yeah, it's an odd one. Some dogs with separation anxiety do seem to do better. And some, like I say, are awful. Let me see. Let me go back up to your questions. Emily says, my greyhound is okay once I've left. He resigns himself to the fact that I've gone, but he does go crazy, barking, growling, and throwing himself at me before I go. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like he's obviously not happy that you're going. As long as you've got a camera on and you know that he is truly settling, then behavior doesn't tend to stay static when it's driven by fear. So dogs don't stay at the same level of fear usually. They normally get more scared or less scared. So if he's frightened, Emily, you'll see that behavior get worse. If he's just kind of protesting, then it will go away. But just make sure that you're watching those first few minutes and that there's no panic in those first few minutes. Okay, so where am I? More questions. Yeah, Leslie has just made a comment. One of mine became diabetic and is now like Lynn. Health change can have a massive impact on behavior. When you think about it, when we feel unwell, we like people around us, or we want to know that, people are at the end of the phone, or, we don't want to feel on our own when we don't feel well. Mandy says, ours wreck the house when we go out. They have to come everywhere. Oh, I'm sorry to read that. So there was a question earlier on. And I think it might have been asked in the Facebook group. So I will just answer it here, though. Somebody was asking about their blind dog who was 14. Is there anything you can do with an older dog who develops separation anxiety? I mean, you can. And my latest podcast explains how we can change a brain at any age. But that fear is it's not that it's that your dog's more scared because of the vision, but it's so new and so different for your poor dog. And I get it, because my 12 and a half year old is losing her sight. So I do get that. You can help them feel safer. And I would do that with some gentle exercises where I'm not moving around very much, but I'm getting them used to me moving. And often with dogs that go blind, they start getting really worried about us even being in different rooms. So I would just keep it really gentle and really low stress, but just get them okay with you moving and being in different parts of the room and different parts of the house. And then if that goes okay, I might try departures, but I would definitely work on around the house stuff first, because a lot of these dogs, when they lose their sight, they're really worried about just being in the room on their own. Hi, Will. Oh no, Marika's question was first. Actually, no, it was Grace. So let's do Grace. I'm not sure why Archie was able to be left for an hour, but then regressed, and we needed to adjust the dosage to progress, meaning to continue with training from less than an hour. Not sure what caused the regression and what to do to mitigate that in the future. It's really frustrating when we don't know what caused it, because if we know what caused it, we can get into problem solving mode, can't we, Grace? And we can, we won't train at this time, or we won't train under these conditions. If you can find the data, great. It sounds like you can't, and that's okay, because often we can't. Often we think there's a reason, and there is, but the dog isn't telling us, or there's no evidence to suggest to us, to our human brains, what's going on. In my recent podcast, I talked about how when we're trying to get them to be comfortable on their own grace, we're creating this new really smooth pathway. And to do that, we're chopping down trees and we're wading through mud. And sometimes, even though we've made really good progress, the brain just hits a really difficult piece, a really thick, denser patch of wood, or it's boggier. And then it's easier for the dog's brain to go, oh, I'll just go back to how I associated before. I'll use the old pathway because that's smooth and that's easier. And that's all that's going on. So that learning is still there, Grace. It's just your dog has just decided to go back to the old way of associating. I thought the anxiety was due to be... Oh, okay. I thought the anxiety was due to being frightened to be alone, but it transpires that he fears being separated from me. Is that usual? It's common. So of all the dogs who don't like being left, probably about 20 to 30% of them also struggle with being separated from their human. So even somebody else being home with them won't do. What you do with those dogs is you teach them there's more to the world than you by spreading the love. Got another podcast episode on that. Do check that one out, what to do with a dog who's hyper attached. You can work on that one at the same time as doing the separation anxiety training. The two things go together. So it's not usual, but it's common. Oh, and Jill, same thing for you. Jill says, my dog is really anxious at home when I go out, even when she is with her husband. She is with my husband. Is this more over attachment than separation anxiety? Same thing. Yeah, it's the same thing as I just answered. Okay, so one of the things that you can do, I know lots of people are asking questions about how you get hold of stuff. I do have a membership group. So if you want to work with me, I have a membership group. I know some of you commenting are in that. And that's where we work together. You can get my training app. You can get to ask me these questions all the time. And that's now open until Tuesday. So you need to be quick. Let me just see. Well, I love what I do, and I'm so lucky, Leslie, that I get to do this. So thank you for saying that. Karen says, Ziggy cries even if I go out to the bathroom. Karen, for you, if that's really difficult for you, and it would be, I get that. A couple of things. Work out if you're okay just to let him come with you. It's not a disaster, despite what you might read on the internet. You're not being a bad owner, and it's not a disaster if you let your dog follow. However, I get it. You want a shower in peace. So a really good thing to use there is something called Magic Mat. And that's where you're going to teach Ziggy to be okay in a different part of the room to start off with, and then a different part of the house. And you're going to teach Ziggy that that's rewarding, right? That being somewhere else is rewarding. Andrew, what is your view of using a crate? So dogs love to den. We know that. To a degree. Wolves definitely love to den. And so I think that we've got into our heads that dogs love crates. Now, I've got a bunch of crates around the house. And my dogs do love hanging out in crates. They really do. But you've got to think. So let me just answer your question really quickly. I don't love crates for separation anxiety training. Here's the reason. Dogs do seem to love crates, and they do seem to love being in them. But if you think about the natural state for a dog in the den is that puppies and their mum will be in a den, wolf puppies will be in there to a certain age, and then the puppies start to get more and more confident and start to move away. And it's the same with dogs. But the den is a safe place. It's a great place to go when there's a predator or when stuff is happening outside that you want to escape from. The problem with separation anxiety is dogs aren't trying to escape something. They're trying to escape to something. And dens don't have gates on them. Dens don't have doors on them. So I love giving dogs access to crates because they seem to really like being in there. But I just like the door being open. And for most dogs with separation anxiety, as soon as we close that door, it's almost like there's an extra layer of isolation and fear because they can't now get out. So now they can't get to you through the front door, and there's a double layer. So but you can do it. You can get a dog to be okay in its crate when you leave, but it's a long process. And I'm all for making this as easy as possible for you. Having said that, you can if you're worried about chewing or destroying, which most people are when they ask about should I crate my dog when I leave, you're going to go out for short periods of time to start off with. And then also you've got to remember that you'll be watching your dog on camera the whole time. And then the final thing is, if your dog is chewing and destroying because they're scared, when you change how they feel about being left, they'll stop chewing and destroying. So you'll make life easier for you and your dog if you leave the door open on a crate when you're doing this training. Yeah, so Karen, even for you though, then I can't do that as he eats anything he gets his paws on. Yeah, I get it. I remember that. You're in the shower, you turn and look, and then I don't know, something else has been chewed. So for you, I might not be so avoidant of crating. So I do love crates, and they are great for keeping puppies safe for those few minutes where you can't watch them like a hawk. I really like using a tether for a puppy around the house if they don't want to be crated and it's hard work for you to get them to love being crated. People are mentioning X-Pens, and the X-Pens can work too. Somebody in my Separation Anxiety Heroes membership actually came up with this brilliant idea that I've used ever since. Stealing it, Patty, I love it. You in the X-Pen with your dog. I don't mean sat in a 5-foot X-Pen. I mean, you, when you're sat working, for example, you might use the X-Pen to block off the rest of the room so that you don't have to watch your puppy all around. But you can crate train gradually and gently, and that could be an option for you too. So Karen, for you, I would check out my book on puppy separation anxiety, because I've got a ton of different options for helping you get that bit of peace and quiet when you need it. You're welcome. You're welcome, Andrew. And aren't they the best dogs? Says Mom to two cockapoos. They are great dogs. Okay, so a few more questions. Yeah, Corinne. Karen Overall's relaxation protocol. Lots of trainers find it hard because you jump around a bit between different things, don't you? You do out of sight, and then you'll do a distraction, you do a noise or something. So I prefer teaching a really nice calm downstay, which is what we use the magic mat for. And also the out of sight for most dogs with separation anxiety can be really hard. But in my magic mat plan, we do that really incrementally. And we do it so incrementally that usually you can get to that out of sight. Jenny says, how much is the app and group support? So it's a 3-month program, and it starts at £39 or $49. Somebody will probably share the link, or you can just type in the link below. Laurie says, my dog is fine at daycare. And you know what? That's great. Then I love it when dogs with separation anxiety enjoy daycare, because not only is it a massive break for you, but it's good for their little brains. Lots of dogs really need dog interaction, particularly the youngsters. So if they like daycare, that's great news. Hi, Leanne. My puppy loves his crate. Yay, and sleeps in it. And we can have him in the day for about an hour after a long walk, which works. However, when I leave for work in the morning, he panics. So for you, Leanne, there's some really good news there. You've got a puppy who can sleep in a crate for an hour. Now, sometimes that can be really frustrating because you think, but why can't they do it at other times? And earlier on, I said, dogs have this way of working out what's safe and what's not, and puppies do the same. What works for me, what doesn't work for me. And for whatever reason, your gorgeous little puppy has decided that when you do the stuff that predict you leaving for work, it's just not, he's scared, he's panicking, he's not happy. So for you, I would be training in those mornings. I would do as much as I can to not do all the things before I leave. So maybe take longer to leave so you don't have to rush around as much. You might want to put stuff, if you've got a couple of bags, that's not a good example. If you've got keys, for example, put them in your bag the night before, that kind of thing. And then do the training in the morning to help your puppy start to realize that, oh, I can do it in the day, I can do it in the morning too. So he's got that confidence. We just need to transfer it now. Do you know, Carol, I don't know. And there is an article that we share in Separation Anxiety Heroes by Alana Reisner that covers that. So, well, gives you more insight into that. So I always let the vets discuss that sort of thing. Will says, our dog is always attentive to our actions and often leaving is exciting for her because we usually take her with her. Yes, and that's why I like Dora as a boar, because Dora as a boar tells excitable dogs that no, the door doesn't always mean something amazing is going to happen. When we do the training, sometimes she'll bark or yip once and then we go back to attention. We know that when she is in full panic, she barks and howls consistently. Is the attentive bark considered anxiety over threshold? This is one of those where I'd say I'd need to see video. Sometimes that barking, if it dies down, is usually a sign that I'm just amped up, overexcited, and that kind of thing, rather than panicky. Interestingly, when dogs are left alone, when they vocalize, and I've watched so many videos in my Heroes Club now, and I've seen so many of these dogs, most of them howl. They howl like a lone wolf. But it could well be that is just overexcitement, or it could be rising panic. So it's one of those where it's hard to tell without video. Yay! You're welcome, Jenny. It's taking time, but seeing progress is life-changing. Yes, it really is. And, I never get tired of coming in and get emotional about this now and seeing my boy asleep. Even the other day, I took a video of it because I came in. He was dead bugging. I was doing loads of things when I came in. I was like, oh, okay. You're not even going to come and say hi to me. I walked right up to him, started videoing him, and I was just waiting. And then he just went, oh, hi. It never gets tired, because when you've had life that's as restricted as ours, the payoff is amazing. And also, who doesn't want a dog that feels happy all the time? None of us want our dogs to be anxious and sad. We want our lives back. We want our sweet dogs to be happy too. All right, my voice is now going, so I'm going to just quickly see if we've got any last questions. I hope to see some of you in my membership. We really, it's a great place. It's the most supportive community you can imagine. You will be surrounded by people who totally get what you're going through and who understand why I get emotional about this. Mandy, I'm going to do your last question. My puppy has hyperattachment with me, and she's a miniature wire-haired dachshund. Oh, gorgeous. I've managed to leave her 3 times in 11 weeks. In crate, fine on a night, but not in the day. Yeah, another really common one, particularly with puppies. Why is it that some of them are okay at night, but then they lose it in the day? The answer is we don't know, other than that in her little head, she's decided that it's scary when you leave in the day, but she's fine at night. It's just like because puppy, because dog, as I say. But the good news, Mandy, is she's shown she can do that. So now if you work on the home alone training, and I would definitely suggest out of crate, as scary as that might sound, for a puppy, because when you do the home alone training, you're doing really short sessions, seconds to start with. You're watching her like a hawk on your camera, and you're going to really make sure that anything she can get into is out of the way. You're going to make more progress. Some puppies do really well when crated when you leave. Helena and Rini are a great example of that in my puppy book, but most puppies do better out of crate. As scary as that might sound, but it does work. All right. Thank you so much for joining me today. It's, as ever, it's lovely to chat to you. Oh, Andrew, I've got to finish on your comment. I live alone and I've wondered if I've made a big mistake, but pleasing to know it is common. No, it is not you. It is not you. And I can tell you, as mum to 2 cockapoos, who I could call calm and crazy. In fact, those could be their names. It's not what you do. I did exactly the same things with India, and she's as calm as they come. And then came Percy. A lot of these dogs are hardwired with this, not because of their breed, but because of genetics. Stuff that's happened to them in their early days as well can affect, and stuff that's just, in their lines, in their genes. All right, so on that note, we will leave it there, and I look forward to maybe seeing some of you in Heroes, but otherwise I'll see you online soon. Thank you, everyone. Have a good rest of your weekend.